Okay, just recorded one. Now I'm going to record one more. So, long rests, short rests, rests in general. Something a lot of tables have issues with is managing the various rests and making sure people get enough combats per day, because the way 5e is designed is it's a bit more about resource expenditure than clever combat solutions, which can be a clever DM and good players can always work that in. That's not that big a deal. But it revolves more around resource management, because the way combats and rests and stuff are broken down, you're supposed to have 6 to 8 combat encounters per adventuring day, with 2 short rests and 1 long rest, which is a lot of combats for one day. And some of those combats are level 15 characters fighting 12 goblins. So, and like, it's both, sometimes the resources expended are your character's health, sometimes they're spell slots, sometimes they're class features that you can use 3 times a day, things like that. So, this is something that contributes to what a lot of people perceive as the divide between spellcasters and marshals, and on a lot of tables that is true. Tables that have like 1, 2, maybe 3 combats per adventuring day. That's what do you call it? Yeah, that's true. If a spellcaster only has to worry about this combat before they get another long rest and get all their spell slots back, they can blow all their high-level spells and just delete the encounter. But that's the problem, that on tables like this, the spellcasters will tend to outshine the martial characters. But one of the issues there, that is an issue, but something people could do is change up how rests work. And this is ultimately up to the DM. But you can, modify the way rests work based on your party composition. Like, if, for example, your party consists of mostly characters that, like, let's say it consists of, like, a sorcerer, a cleric, and a ranger, let's say. And a rogue, yeah. A sorcerer, cleric, ranger, rogue. Those 4 characters. For the most part, those characters don't get anything special out of a short rest, outside of, I think, clerics get their channel divinities restored on a short rest, which is 1 resource. And then I think sorcerers get something, some rogue and ranger classes get something on a short rest, but for the most part, they don't get anything on a short rest versus a long. So those particular characters aren't going to care about short rests outside of spending hit die, which, if there's not a lot of combats, they're not going to need to do. But then, on the flip side, if you have characters that are mostly like a fighter, a warlock, a wizard, and let's say a barbarian. Those 4 characters, not so much the barbarian, but those 4 characters, they would be able to get something out of short rests. The fighter and warlock in particular, because like everything the fighter has almost recovers on a short rest. The warlock gets their spell slots back. So those characters would need, quote, more short rests. But how do you parse that? Because short rests are fucking an hour long. There are a lot of adventure scenarios where your characters can't afford to just sit there for an hour. So, in games where, you need to take a short rest, like where you have really short rest dependent characters, you might consider making short rests 10 minutes, a half hour, just shorter in general. I've even seen some advice, and some people talk about making short rests 6 seconds. So you just immediately take a breather out of the combat, and you get certain resources back. You can spend hit die and recover a little bit, and that keeps the game moving. It can potentially throw off balance, but as a DM, you can account for those things. So especially, this is less important in more experienced tables, but let's say you've got a player that is playing a warlock and they don't really fully understand what they signed up for when they picked a warlock, and then they blow their spells on stupid crap, and they're in the middle of the dungeon and they have no spell slots left, and there's like 2 more combat encounters to go. What do? And also, you have a ritual going on in the back of the dungeon that your characters have to deal with. Otherwise, bad stuff happens, and they don't have the time to sit around for an hour. Well, that warlock has to go the rest of the adventure with no spell slots, and all they have is Eldritch Blast. So, not great. So, for a party composition like that has a warlock like that, I might, in that one instance, let them take a quicker short rest, or just kind of refund them a spell slot or 2. Something like that to quicken the moment, but make sure you say, like, hey, from now on, you won't get your spell slots back like this. Like, your patron has given you your spell slots back for this one time. He can't normally give you this benefit. Some sort of bullshit like that. But then also, let's say, you have the concept of the adventuring day, but you don't want to try to force 8 encounters into one day. That doesn't make any sense. So instead, you could use the, quote, gritty realism rules, which essentially expands the amount of time everything takes. Like, now, short rests are 8 hours, and long rests are like a week in a safe location, like a city. That's fucked up. It does allow you to have less encounters per day, but still allow you to fit, quote, the normal amount of encounters into the adventuring cycle, which I feel like ends up with some boring combats. So I would probably do something halfway between this, and for the like SCP inspired, or not inspired, but the SCP campaign series of one-shots and stuff that I'm doing sooner or later, once Erlmeyer goes on hiatus. Once I start doing, when I run that, I'm doing like a hybrid of this of that. Like, short rests are quick; they're like 10 minutes. Long rests are a normal amount of time, but you get all your hit die back, and I think you only automatically heal half. It was something like that, and then you still get your resources back. But then the longer the party spends outside of a safe location, the more their hit die, or the less hit die they get back on a long rest. So, like, initially, that first long rest, yeah, they'll get all their hit die back. Then every day they get one less back, or maybe they get half back that second day. Who knows? I don't know exactly how I'm going to tweak it, but that's how it's mostly going to work. And that kind of lets you have that resource denigration degradation, not denigration. Your resources degrade, and maybe you start to get less spell slots back, or however it works. Depends. But there's lots of ways you can tweak long rests, like like you don't always get all your spell slots back. You get you get half of them or something. That will require a little more maintenance, and it's not automated. And because long rest, it's easy. You go, okay, you get all your shit back and half your hit time. But there's ways to tweak it to change the balance and pacing and stuff of your team. That's it.